Hey, it's Joe, and welcome to another episode of the Test Guild Automation Podcast. And today we'll be talking with Igor all about mobile testing, specifically about probably XCUITest, Espresso, and all things automation awesomeness. If you don't know, Igor is the accomplished CEO and founder of Ingenious.io, a leading mobile consulting startup that caters to top-tier clients. He's worked with people like Apple and Grammarly. He has almost 15 years of experience in mobile development. And he's an accomplished author and authority in this field with a focus on building world-class engineering teams that deliver mobile applications. I've met with him multiple times. We met up at Selenium Conf. He's working on a lot of cool things. He has some open source projects he's been working on. He has some education things he's working on that he'll be unveiling shortly. So a lot of experience. He also works at used to work at a lot of top Silicon Valley companies, like I think worked at Barnes and Noble, Expedia, Tinder, and he's played a key role in driving mobile release management, mobile DevOps, and quality processes across multiple companies. And he's a guest speaker at multiple conferences as well. Really excited to have him on the show. You don't want to miss this episode. And also, I'm really excited to let you know he's going to be doing a 90-minute workshop at the 2024 Automation Guild. And to check that out, head on over to automationguild.com. It'll be released soon, or a registration will be open soon. So you definitely check that out as well. You don't want to miss this episode. Check it out. This episode of the Test Guild Automation Podcast is sponsored by the Test Guild. Test Guild offers amazing partnership plans that cater to your brand awareness, lead generation, and thought leadership goals. Get your products and services in front of your ideal target audience. Our satisfied clients rave about the results they've seen from partnering with us, from boosted event attendance to impressive ROI. Visit our website and let's talk about how Test Guild can take your brand to the next level. Head on over to testguild.info and let's talk. Hey, Igor, welcome to the Guild.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you. I'm thrilled.
Awesome to have you. It's been a while. I've been wanting to have you on the show for a while. I don't know why it's taken me 9 years, but welcome. Excited to have you. Before we get into it, Igor, is there anything I missed in your bio that you want the Guild to know more about?
No, it was amazing bio. Probably one of the best intros. Thank you, Joe. I think you said it all. I've been in testing community for a long time. Test automation was a big thing before, and a lot of people thought about this or talk about this in mainstream. And even up to date, running the company, which is a mobile first company, right? We do not just test automation testing, but also mobile development. I'm a huge evangelist, big fan of yours. And I'm still in the industry of testing and test automation.
Love it. So you have a really interesting background. Just curious to know how you got into mobile testing, because you've been there for a while and you're one of the first people that I know that really started innovating in this area. So how did you get into mobile automation testing as one of your real specialties?
Yeah, thank you, Joe, for this question. I think that it just happened naturally. My first internship was mobile before iPhone and Android era on, if you remember, Symbian, J2ME platforms back in 2006, 2007. So I got into mobile before what people actually talk about mobile, right? And back then we even automated on those platforms. I work on a startup who was building the SDK for Eclipse to build the applications for J2ME phones and Symbian phones. So we were writing automation even before people talk about automation. And naturally, I segued into the Android first because Android was more mature than, as if you remember, 2008, 2009, those brick, G1 phones. So I started automating with a Robotium back in 2008, 2009, because instrumentation, actually 2009, 2010, because instrumentation that shipped with the original SDK wasn't usable as a framework for automation. So Robotium was the thing. And then around 2012, slowly moved to the IES automation. There was a framework that used to be called Frankenstein Frank. And then I met Jonathan Lips at the conference in GTAC 2013, and he convinced me to use the pre-release version of Appium And from 2013 until 2016, I was a huge SaaS Lab evangelist, walking through different conferences, internally and externally, like, like Facebook, you name it, like Visa, and talk about Appium and how great it is. And around 2015, after Espresso framework was released, I started preaching about Espresso. I think Valery did a great presentation 2013, but it still wasn't open to the public. But by 2015, I started converting. Back days when I worked at Expedia, we started converting from Appium to Espresso, and then 2016, 17, XCUITest. So I lived through entire transformation, in the mobile space of test automation. It's quite a journey.
Yeah, love your background. So why leave Appium? Uh, any pros and cons on when someone should use it before we dive into some other solutions that may be a better fit for certain companies?
It's a great question because a lot of people ask this. Not only people, customers ask this question. When should we use one over another? And the answer is it depends on the problem you try to solve. As of today, it's a crystal clear. If it is native, if the application built natively, like using the iOS stack or Android stack, definitely use native solution. That's the way to go. I spoke with a lot of folks, got a feedback. Appium was really flaky if you go native, like probably 80% of the best shot. However, if the app built as a cross-platform using frameworks such as React Native, then I think Appium is indispensable. So I would personally use Appium for cross-platform applications.
Absolutely. So normally when on the podcast and when I go to conferences, you always hear about Selenium and Appium. Not so much about XCUITest, maybe sometimes, but even less about Espresso. Why do you think that is? Or do you think there's is there a big community around Espresso? Or is it just something that's so niche that maybe that's why you don't hear about it as much as Selenium or Appium?
I think that's a very good question. Yeah, I think there's several reasons for that. So number one is the verticals, right? It just happens to be that from the Selenium era, right? When the Selenium became popular in 2011, 2012 was the Selenium WebDriver 2.0. A lot of manual testers start converting to task automation via that. And that segued into the Appium. So a lot of management, and that's the thing that I'm going to focus on management, made a decision to build horizontal expertise in test automation for the teams, where they take a test automation engineer or as that and say, okay, now you do web, mobile, iOS, Android, backend, you name it. Versus the XCUITest Espresso, this is verticals, right? So similarly for development, have you ever seen a developer that works on iOS development that does Android? Probably not. Similar and vice versa, right, for the iOS. So I think that the reason those topics are not spoken, at the conferences and widespread is because it's expertise in one area. So in my perception, because I've been teaching that topic also for a long time in our boot camps and in our programs over course of right now 10 years, I've noticed that the best SDATs for the iOS or Android are those who are come from a development background. So in my experience, the best conversion, it would take like fairly technical person, like a junior iOS developer, you can convert them quickly. From the QA, they have to learn the platform itself, right? But however, the power of XCUITest and Espresso way more, in terms of the impact than you use cross platform solutions. So it's about expertise and domain knowledge. I think that's the key. And management usually make decision to create like a cookie cutter approach. Okay, let's just build the universal soldier who will do everything instead of build the verticals. I think that's the main reason.
So when someone is in a vertical, who tends to do the testing then? Is it mostly the developers that are using XCUITest and Espresso, or like you said, because you do need some programming language, do testers get involved later on? How does that normally work?
So normally, if the management makes the right decision and put a dedicated person and with reasonable goals, say, okay, for next year, you don't do anything else but, let's say, IES automation, nothing else. So you have to focus on one platform. We're going to touch you. So that person becomes, knowledgeable in that platform. They work with development. Don't forget that all the source code for tasks when you automate in the XCUITest or Espresso lives in the same code repository as the application under test, which means that they will naturally work on the same environment. DPRs will be popped out for developers as well on that platform. They talk the same language. So usually the person develops with the team. An amazing side effect that I noticed is it's an amazing one. Folks who work as the SDAD on either iOS or Android vertical, automating those native solutions, about after 1 year get converted to developers, but they have the main knowledge and they sustain the framework, not only the task, but infrastructure, because besides testing, you will have to work with a test ops infrastructure for that native thing. So that's how usually these people build up. So it could be a very solid test automation engineer come from web or backend, it doesn't matter, but they have to stay focused on one platform for a long time. So not necessarily developers. But I've seen teams where developers get tasked to support those tests. But that's very subjective because, developers have to spend a lot of time to build features, fixing bugs. And that's why that role exists, right? And then we recommend the companies don't mix those roles. But I've seen companies that successfully implement this. It's doable. But that's a reality of today's world of software development in the mobile space.
So Igor, I think I forgot to just set the stage before we dive a little more deeper. I just assume everyone knows what XCUITest and Espresso is, but I'm not sure. So let's just define what is XCUITest and what is Espresso before we dive in anymore.
Yes, it's really simple. XCUITest is the library that ships with the Xcode. So when you download Xcode for iOS development, it's already part of it. You don't have to install anything else third party. It's just an additional library for writing UI functional tests on top of their XCTest library. It's extension of XCTest library for unit testing. So you use it for writing functional tests for all variety of Apple products, not just iPhone. You can write it for Apple Watch, you can write it for Apple TV, and we actually have clients who do for Mac OS X as well. And in terms of setup, we actually did measure that. It takes under 1 minute to set it up, just a couple of clicks and you're good to go. So in terms of Espresso, similarly to the XCUITest, it's a library that ships with the Android SDK. So when you download Android Studio out of the box, you need a couple of things with a Gradle setup. And Gradle is, for those folks who doesn't know what a Gradle is, just a wrapper on top of the Maven for Android. And it takes literally like a minute also to set up the Espresso test. Espresso is just a library. They have also UI Automator. So it's not only one testing library that ships with the Android SDK. And both frameworks are used for native automation of native iOS and Android applications. Extremely powerful. You can do a lot of things like that, Appium cannot do physically, because Appium mostly is a black box automation. So you can write own interceptors. You can launch isolated activities like a screen. You can put the application in certain state. You can test client analytics, and you can control A/B test from the inside app, which is why it's so powerful. So those are framework in a nutshell. That's what they do.
Nice. So they tend to run faster. It sounds like you could set them up quicker than maybe someone starting with Appium. But how about speed wise of these tests? Because they're native, do they run quicker or any other benefits?
Absolutely. And that's why I recommend we go native, try to use native frameworks for exactly the reasons you mentioned. Speed is the big thing. When you have like 10, 20 tests, it doesn't matter, right? But when you have thousands, it becomes really matter, especially when your management try to run it every PR merge. So every commit. So you want to trigger all these tests. So you cannot run them for hours. So yes, the biggest benefit, they're fast. When people talk about Appium 2.0, today's Appium, right, is a wrapper around those frameworks. So under hood, there's still those Espresso and XCUITest. So wrapper is just the Appium is just a wrapper around those native frameworks. So you still kind of use them under hood. But don't forget about Appium architecture. It's a Node.js server, right? So it creates extra layer of complexity and also creates extra layer for flakiness. So basically, you remove that extra layer, use it natively, right? So yeah, speed is going to be a big difference. Another thing is orchestration and stability. Because you have full control over application under test. And like I mentioned, it's more like you can do more white boxy things. You can do like things that you cannot do with Appium. And I just mentioned those examples, like for instance, deep linking, right? Or put application certain state, or mocking, right? You do not have to write a separate server for that. You can mock them right on the spot. So there's just a few examples where it's so powerful. And a great example, a lot of clients are asking to compare Appium because they're already using it with native solutions. So, I'm just saying these numbers not because I just want to show off or just this is the real numbers. You can, if you're doing the right thing, if you write a test with a good architecture in mind and using the best practices, with XCUITest Espresso, you can achieve 98% stability. It's very high. Why not 100%, right? Is because there's infrastructural things you cannot control, right? And that becomes a more test ops, DevOps setup. But from the test perspective, you can achieve 98% fairly easy with native solutions.
It's a pretty bold statement. So, is this from experience, or this is like something just you've seen over your career when you work with clients? Like, if you're going against Appium versus, I'm not saying one's better than the other, but just say in general, why are they more stable though? Is it because people don't know how to write correct Appium test, or it's just because it is native that it's in the ecosystem, so it tends just to run smoother and more reliably?
Both. What just meant? I understand it's a very bold statement, but again, I speak out of my experience. I teach this thing. I talk to a lot of students. I talk to a lot of people from various companies. For the matter of fact, I just came back from TaskCon where we did the workshop, and I asked folks who's Appium, was there stability? And they say roughly around 80%. So 20% flakiness. That's a reality. But native automation, how you can achieve this? Absolutely. Don't forget, you are working on the same tool set as the developers, right? You are very close to them. A lot of apps not automatable, right? You have to make the app automatable. But because you work on the same stack with them, you can do that. You communicate the same language with them. That's one reason. So you can influence the app to be more stable and be ready for automation and add necessarily hooks like accessibility identifiers or content descriptors, right? You can do that. You can do it on your own. Not only mention this, there will be automation reveal the bugs that manual testing cannot reveal. And again, you speak with developers. That's one way. Second is because it's native. As I mentioned, Appium create extra of complexity because it's a server run. It's a wrapper around this. So you remove all this noise. So you can use parallel test execution much more faster than use like Selenium grid with Appium like architecture, right? Which basically cannot be very fast by its nature. So again, I'm not just saying that Appium is a bad tool. No, Appium is an amazing tool, but for right reason. If you ask me today, Igor, what would you choose for cross-platform testing? I would go myself and do Appium. It's just better. But natively, to achieve that 98% stability, you have to have a you have to use best engineering practices and follow those protocols. It's not like you're gonna by default, if you write XCUITest or Espresso test, you're gonna get 98% stability. No, you have to follow best practices. Like one of the great example is network mocking, or they call stubbing, right? Without those things, you will never achieve that stability because backend by itself can undergo multiple deployments per day. Backend can have hundreds of A/B test experiments. How are you going to control end-to-end test? So by writing tests that are hitting the backend, even XCUITest or Espresso are not going to give you this 98%. However, orchestration is going to be a very important thing.
So you mentioned network marketing a few times. Maybe you could give us a little heads up on best practices or ways you maybe see where people don't leverage network marketing and how they can and what it can really help them with.
Yeah, I mean, usually when we talk about network marketing, right? That the whole terminology came from development, right? That's where when developer write the unit test, they have to mock everything. And that's what actually gives the unit test so much stability, right? But when we come to the test automation for functional test automation, right? And when it comes to the test automation engineers and they hear this phrase network mocking or stubbing, it just gives them a goose skin. They're like, OMG, what the hell it is, right? What should I do with that? So I think that comes with the background of most test automation engineers because they're not coming from a development background. They come from a testing background. I think that just spooks them off. But network marking out of the box for Android, right? It ships with the Mock HTTP web server, which you can do. It's just another library. Basically, what you do, you record, server responses, and you alter them. You don't need like to have gigantic responses from the backend, and store them locally. And when the app actually hits that request, it redirects them to this fake data. So this way, you always have the same outcome. So let's say that if I use application like a chat app, I always chat with Joe, not anybody else. And I always get hello world. So I know exactly what the application going to return, which is actually brings another question. What about end-to-end test? And that's where manual tests are supposed to be, right? So we are testing the Android or iOS app in isolation, or like in hermetic testing, right? Backend should be tested by the backend test, like API or microservices. And that's how we know that those tests are actually finding the front-end bugs, not the back-end bugs. So mocking is very essential for test stability and speed because we're completely removing that round trip from request response. And a lot of people ask me, like, what about WebSockets? Can we mock them? Yes. Google Protocol buffers? Absolutely. It doesn't matter. We can mock everything, right? But there are different tools available. There's third-party solution like SBT Test Tunnel for iOS been used for a long time. So what we did in Ingenious, we built our own solution like a VCR recorder, if you remember those from back days, right? Which is basically a proxy which let all the requests come through, but next time it redirects to the fake data. So we created this, very easy, very like lightweight mock web server, which is helps to eliminate the fear from the test automation engineers and help them to ramp up to the SDATs pretty quickly instead of like sitting and trying to understand like how the backend works, what the response schema is supposed to look like, and use the Charles for that, right? So, yeah.
What's the name of that tool?
So that's we're not open source it yet.
Oh, okay.
We just use for internal clients, but
Gotcha.
we're planning to do something about this. We're not sure yet internally. So far, we use it mostly for our students and for our clients, but we haven't open sourced it yet. However, I will give you a links of the open frameworks that available, and we can share with the community down the video, right? As a links, yes.
Absolutely. So I'll have that in the show notes for sure. People should definitely check out. So besides network mocking, you mentioned orchestration. For some reason, I assume orchestration would be easier with Appium, but is orchestration different when you use an XCUITest or Espresso? And if so, like, what do you use to make it more seamless or easy?
Can you elaborate on orchestration? Because orchestration, it's a very broad term, right?
Just running tests in parallel or across multiple devices really quickly, I would say.
Okay. Because a lot of people mean different things when they talk about orchestration. In terms of the test execution, absolutely. So we build ourselves open source solution for that because we back in 2019 when we start getting our first clients for consultancy, we couldn't find one. We tried to use Blue Pill, we tried to use a few others, but nothing worked out of the box. So we built called Sift. Again, I'm going to provide the link. It's on the GitHub. It's open source. completely, free. So Swift built for both iOS and Android, and it helps to run tests in parallel natively, right? And it's very configurable. It has the rerun mechanism in it. You can add nodes, as many as you need, and you can build even autoscaler. So basically, the more tests you have, you just add more nodes, and it's gonna run in parallel. And it's super fast and very stable. We use for existing clients. That's how we're continuously updating it. We got a few community members who started using that as well. And we run a Discord community where people come join us and ask questions, and we'll help them with the setup of the Swift. Yes. But there is not, like, when we talk about enterprise setup, when we have, like, for instance, one of our clients is Apple, and they need thousands of tests, right? So for that reason, there's a very different DevOps and TevOps involved. Lately, we partner up with the company called Marathon Labs. There's a lot of companies you call Lambda Test, Browser Stack, SaaS Labs. I mean, I'm not gonna head spin. You probably had all of them on your show, but you never had a Marathon Labs.
No.
So who are these guys, right? I completely randomly met them. You probably heard about Case.io, right? Nikita, I think you had him on the show. So he introduced me to these folks. So this is just a bunch of very smart engineers who try to solve the problem of enterprise level test execution for native tests for iOS and Android. So they don't do web, they do only native. And their one-liner kind of advertising is, no matter how many tests you have, we're running them under 15 minutes. I was like, no way. So I tried them, I POC'd them, and they do it. So they're very crazy DevOps setup, and they actually run thousands of tests under 15 minutes, 15, not 50, 15. So we partner up with them, and they are doing a great job. One of the co-founders of them, I think, wrote Caspresso. It's a wraparound espresso. He is there as well. Very smart guys. And again, they brought the expertise natively. They think they built Android first and iOS next. And when we need to go for enterprise setup like test orchestration, we use them. If it's a startup, it's overkill. You don't need to use them. So we use the Swift and just set up the local, environment. I mean, local doesn't mean like a physical Mac Minis, right? We're talking about like some cloud, like AWS, right? For instance.
Let's actually saw a demo of this at Selenium Conf. You gave me a quick overview. Seemed really cool. It supports real devices as well, I believe, and has a reporting system, has all these cool things built in for free.
You talking about Marathon Labs, or you talking about whom?
No, Swift.
Oh, Swift, yeah, we support everything. Yeah, Swift, yeah. We actually presented TestCon in Vilnius recently. We support this for right now 4 years. Yeah, and it's very scalable. I mean, there's no boundaries there. It's support, by the way, also Mac OS. You don't need the iPhone. Support physical devices, emulators, and you can scale vertically and horizontally, no limits. Yes.
So I guess another maybe stumbling block for some people that are testers, testing focus. Are there any resources available maybe to beginners to learn XCUITest or Espresso? And how steep is maybe the learning curve compared to, say, Selenium or Appium?
I wouldn't say it's more steeper. I think it's more, you have to be more focused. So what I recommend people who decide to go to that route, I mean, you have to have some sort of a plan, right? You cannot just go like without the plan. And the plan has to be follows. Do you want to become eventually iOS or Android developer? If this is the plan, if you're thinking that in the near future, 2 years from today, 1 year, 3 years, doesn't matter, you want to become iOS or Android dev, that's the route to go. That's the number thing you have to ask yourself. Because what happens, again, I just noticed this over the course of past 5 years. All assets that we try to convert or build, they eventually become devs. It's just the reality. If you want to go that route, then yes, absolutely. In terms of learning curve, you will probably have to dive deeper in iOS and Android development, which is not hard nowadays. I mean, Kotlin and Swift are very easy languages to learn. Not harder than Python. They actually use some Python elements in them and JavaScript. It's not Objective-C and Java, right? Which used to be, if you remember, Joe, like nightmare, right, to learn back in the day. But Yeah, Swift and Kotlin are fairly simple. So learning curve is not steeper than you do for web, like using Playwright. But what you will encounter is learning a domain knowledge of the platform. That's going to be the key. That's what their whole time. So you're going to learn how to automate tests pretty quickly, but it's going to take you probably close to 1 year to get familiar with the platform. And again, every app is unique, right? There's no like, all apps look the same. Every app has different architecture, use different libraries. Also, every team has own culture. So you basically live in that culture, right? You will live with gonna talk to iOS developers every day or Android developers. Coming back to our original question, what are the learning resources? So not that many, to be honest. I mean, there are a lot of, for the beginners, just to jumpstart yourself. Like I know that Test Automation University by Appium Tools, they have intro courses. They're a little bit outdated, but they're good enough to jumpstart. Also, both Apple and Android have, recently, by the way, Google released a very nice course for Espresso, completely free. Besides that, if you ask about like external resources, I like Coding with Mitch. You probably heard about this guy, Coding with Mitch. He's a big evangelist on Android development. He has 2 comprehensive courses on Android test automation with Espresso. That's another big one. However, there's not much like enterprise level for XCUITest. So that's why we restarted our university, Ingenious University, in 2023. And we built a comprehensive, we spent more than a year, and 6 engineers work on the course for this enterprise level setup XCUITest. So we have them available right now on our educational platform. And next year, we'll try to do the same thing with Android Espresso. But to be honest, like for the beginners, there's few resources, but to go like in depth, like enterprise level setup, like mocking or test architecture, because iOS development, page object model not going to work. It's not, standard architecture do for web, because Swift is a protocol based programming, not object oriented. So there is a different approach, different architecture. So similarly to like Android use robot framework, right? Not robot as a testing framework, but robot pattern. It's all doable. In my experience, it takes on average like 6 months to get from 0 to a person who confidently write tests, and then about a year experience on top of this. But again, what is your ultimate goal? You have to ask yourself.
Absolutely. So I have to ask you this. Just getting your perspective on where we're going with mobile testing, specific to XCUITest and Espresso. As you know, AI is the buzz. Every solution I speak with nowadays for the web, they have like codeless solutions that automatically will write the code for you, similar to Copilot. So does this help you learn XCUITest and Espresso better because it can write the code for you? Do you see solutions coming out for mobile testing that leverages AI that you probably see maybe if someone was to dive into XCUITest and Espresso, they're going to be not of a job, but out of date, or like not it's going to be easier to get into because you'll be able to leverage something like AI machine learning.
Yeah, it's very modern question, I would say, and up to date. Not so obvious and not so straightforward for the web. So I think AI found itself very well. Like at the moment, we're talking about right now, that you can generate a baseline test for the web much quicker using AI, like ChatGPT, for instance, right? Declarative AI. But you see that how I envision today's like version of AI. It's mostly like your smart body that you talk to. We probably heard it many times. You have to still digest that information and make a rational decision if it, objectively, if it's right or wrong. If you don't have the domain knowledge, how are you going to make this decision? How do you know what it's actually gave to you? But the answer to the direct answer to your question is, it's for the native apps, definitely not so easy as for the web. We tried it. However, you can ask questions to build your examples. Like for instance, you try to battle a problem and you need Google answers. So if you ask ChatGPT, it will give you like a couple examples that can put you on the right track for the solution. In that way, yes, but not gonna write those tests for you. However, where I see AI will be AI is when AI is just like, artificial intelligence. Machine learning will gonna go get us to is more like what Apple Tools does for the UI testing. Not functional, not flow, but UI visual testing. Because now I think we can educate systems what is right or wrong, feed the data, and we don't need to do this image like Apple Tools does, like base screen on top of the new screen. I think those type of tests going to be gone like sooner than we think, and I think that's what Apple Tools going to deliver. I sense it. I don't know. I'm just sense it. That's what they're going to deliver next. Functionize, Apple Tools, Berthy. All these similar like competitors. I think it will be a huge breakthrough in the UI validation. But functional automation wise, go through the flows, still will be there for the foreseeable future, maybe 2-3 years, then I don't know. But again, why I recommend people and whom I recommend people to learn these native solutions is that if you want to become experts in that platform, become really good at this, one of a kind, it's niche, but think about this. Here's my iPhone, right? That's what you probably use every day for everything. So think about this. Yeah, that's always like you want to be expert in this, and you'll be desired as an expert in the industry. And a logical step, you will become developer. It's very subjective, maybe answer, but the best I could.
Awesome. Okay, Igor, before we go, is there one piece of actual advice you can give to someone to help them with their mobile automation testing efforts? And what's the best way to find or contact you?
Yeah, my piece of advice again, that comes from experience. Please don't jump from one chair to another. Stay focused. Right now, even more than ever before, there's so much noise. People talk about AI, and you hear Joe on your talk show. Like, you can get scared pretty quickly. You can get confused and paranoid. Just stay focused. Pick up one domain, pick one vertical, and become really good at this. At least for 1 year, don't change your mindset. Even if you can actually make the a use case for your management. Say, hey, listen, I want to be good, and I will bring a huge benefit to this. So stay focused and become good at one thing, regardless. That's my piece of advice. And how you can contact me, LinkedIn, I'm there. And also we run a Discord community, complimentary, completely free. I brought in more than 24 right now, experts in native test automation management, to help folks, because right now, like I said, we try to help community, right? And I'm going to share the link with you, Joe, so you can share with the community, and then come with the questions anytime, and we're going to get you, your answers regardless. And we put it on different verticals: web, native, backend, development, so you can find your niche there. I think that's the best way to talk to me at any time.
Awesome. And a quick plug, if you want to get up to speed on XCUITest and Espresso, you definitely want to check out Igor's 90-minute workshop that's part of the Automation Guild that's going on in February 5th to the 9th. And you can definitely check that out by registering at automationguild.com. Thanks again for your automation awesomeness. For links to everything of value we covered in this episode, head on over to testguild.com/A474. And if the show has helped you in any way, why not rate it and review it in iTunes? Reviews really help in the rankings of the show, and I read each and every one of them. So that's it for this episode of the Test Guild Automation Podcast. I'm Joe, and my mission is to help you succeed with creating end-to-end, full-stack automation awesomeness. As always, test everything and keep the good. Cheers.
Thanks for listening to the Test Guild Automation Podcast. Head on over to testguild.com for full show notes, amazing blog articles, and online testing conferences. Don't forget to subscribe to the Guild to continue your testing journey.